We are on the book of yoga, and just like in ordinary life, yoga has its own rules, laws, way, process, challenges, issues, difficulties, dangers, experiences, and achievements. This is the course. And ordinary life is not easy, it has its own set of challenges, and yogic life is far from being easy. And just as in ordinary life, it's because of the evolutionary nature of things. So there is no ready to serve lunch. It has to be prepared. So in ordinary life also we have to work to get to a point in whatever things, whether it be a career, a job, or whatever we are striving for, or a relationship, it has to be worked. There is nothing which is ready made. Similarly, in the life of yoga, it's not ready made. Even when the grace is there and has prepared everything, we have to be ready to receive it. Even that's a path in itself. But certain things can make it easy. For example, in life, we are taught everything except how to live. So if we know the rules of living, it's so much easier. But no one teaches us. And so we have to rely on our own limited experience, and we learn how to live by the time we are 80. That's what mother says. So 60 is conservative, 80 is realistic, but by then it's already time for the next life. And some knowledge gets carried over. So it's a slow process. We do learn and grow, but it's a very, very slow process. Therefore, if we knew what is the way to live, it would have been so much simpler. Sometimes one wonders, one wishes, hopes. Similarly, in yoga, there is something called as not rules in the sense of rules, but the shastra of the yoga. What is yoga? How does it proceed? What are its unique challenges, difficulties, dangers? How to go about it? And if we know it, it makes it so much easier to navigate. That's why Sri Aurobindo speaks of Shastra as one of the aids. And it's really a pity, I feel it's a pity that we have so much that Mother and Sri Aurobindo has written. And it normally remains in libraries or sometimes in houses. We pick up a sentence or two, a quotation from here and there, from some magazine somewhere. But that's not the Shastra. Shastra is, for every aspect, Sri Aurobindo has given us in so much detail everything. It's a, to use the word wealth or treasure is to really say something much less than what it is. It's a diamond mine. Much more than that. It's priceless treasure available at just the click of a button. Not even, people used to complain earlier, and I used to wonder that Savitri is 300 rupees. I used to wonder, people spend so much money in all kinds of things, and they are thinking of the cost of Savitri. Nowadays, even that is, so probably the Lord must have heard, so with the internet revolution and the net age, it's available free of cost. All that we need is to click a button and download it. I hope I am not revealing some secret which is not to be said, but everybody knows it. Most of Sri Aurobindo's collected works are available now online. So, it's so easy, ready to just read. And yet it takes time. Why? Because all kinds of suggestions come into the mind. And why I'm saying is that yesterday we were reading about these suggestions which come when we go through the physical and the vital ranges. They come from cosmic ignorance. And we just accept the suggestion and think it's right. But these are things which are coming to encourage and slow the process and encourage the inertia. So one such suggestion, Sri Aurobindo is very difficult. So okay, read the mother. As simple as that. But then, mother also, people say, how to get, where to get. Some excuse is always there. At least read prayers and meditations. Savitri, of course, is wonderful. It's, really speaking, it's really very easy. It's one of the easiest works of Sri Aurobindo, honestly. I mean, definitely easier than Life Divine. May not be easier than Letters of Yoga, on yoga, which are more direct, but it's a fairly easy book and the most important work of Sri Aurobindo. Another suggestion is that suggestions can come in very interesting ways. Another suggestion comes, what is the use of reading when I am not walking the path? Then the answer is walk the path, read and walk the path. Who stops us from walking the path? Read and walk rather than don't read because I am not walking. Then there is a third suggestion which sounds very, very, it's one of the most intelligent suggestions. Garbs itself in a mask of sincerity. I will read only this much and practice this much, then I will read the rest. So a whole lifetime goes. Because every Vakya of Sri Aurobindo, if we take it sincerely in practicing it to its perfection, it's really not possible. It's a total progress. The most important thing is reading itself is a help. It is itself moving on the path. This is what we don't realize. Sri Aurobindo and the mother themselves have said. It contains their power. So when we read, we are actually engaged in yoga. And I have seen people, what they do, some of them, I just saw someone in Russia who would just copy one page of Savitri every day. And really, it's a yoga in its own right. I have myself, done it, and it's something wonderful just to copy one page of Savitri. That is available. We don't have to understand. And I know a lady who is now 91 years of age. And she copies Savitri every day. And her handwriting is almost like print. Small print. And you can't imagine she reads small print Savitri without a specs. She hasn't used specs all her life. And even with dim light, she can read a small print magazine. Perfectly hale and hearty. So, it's a yoga in its own right. It's given to us. Doesn't matter. One sentence, two sentences, three sentences, four sentences. Just writing Savitri is a yoga because what is yoga? Coming in contact with the divine consciousness. Savitri is a meeting point. Divine consciousness is in this and human consciousness is in us. So when we come in contact with Savitri, we are coming in contact with the divine consciousness where Savitri becomes the bridge. Logic is very simple. So this is the first thing, the Shastra of yoga. Similarly in outer life, ordinary life, life of world, we need somebody to help us, like a guide. And we know that when we are little children, parents are very good guides. Not when we are grown up. It's very difficult, though they have more experience, etc., but time spirit changes and it's very difficult to use the same yardsticks unless they are exceptional parents who are yogis or practicing yogis, and even then it's very difficult, it's very challenging. So you turn to teachers or those who are more experienced than ourselves who can help us, mentors, or if nobody else, then reason. It can be a very good guide for those who have a developed reason and a discriminating intellect. But it's still a little lamp. That's in our ordinary life. But in inner life, in spiritual life, we have to again rely on the guide, the guru, the master, his influence, his representative word. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to navigate through the contours of yoga. Again, in afterlife, we have space, time, and context and causality, cause and effect relationship. We have certain domains, countries, their rules, regulations. So inner life has its own contours, its rules, its logic. The logic of outer life doesn't necessarily apply there. A man who is extremely brilliant, very capable, may be extremely successful in outer life. You can almost say, people can almost predict, oh, this boy or girl, so good in studies, definitely she will become a doctor or engineer or whatever else. Nowadays, politician also, though, it's a lucrative profession, but most drop outs and go. But anyways, you can almost predict. But this logic may not apply in spiritual life. A person may be extremely brilliant, very educated, qualified, triple MA, MD, but maybe null and void when it comes to spiritual life. It requires some other aspect, something else, which is other than this outer qualification. So it has its own logic. It has its own, it is a unique journey in its own right. It brings its own set of experiences and one has to grow through them. So we are just reading the experiences of Savitri and many beautiful hints are being given to us for our journey. When we start undertaking the yogic life, we meet with resistances and challenges. And the first resistance comes from the dull inertia of our base, this matter in which consciousness is trapped. It doesn't allow us to even sit still, or it brings a stone like inertia. The only meditation we know is sleep. So when we sit for meditation, there is a tendency to fall asleep. And when Sri Aurobindo was asked this question, he said it is natural because that's the only kind of interiorization that the waking consciousness knows. So what should a sadhak do? Sri Aurobindo says, you have to somehow resist this. It will come, tendency to fall asleep. Don't give up the meditation. Don't disturb others if one is snoring a lot. Try to put a clip, but try to keep awake and meditate. After a while, as we have just read, with will, persistence, grace, a day will come when the bronze door or the iron door opens. One has to sit and knock and knock and knock and knock at the ebony gate with persistence, perseverance. 1 day, 2 days, 10 days, 1 year, nothing happens. And mother compares it to the formation of the chick inside the egg. She says for many days nothing will happen. You will feel you are wasting your time. But sit and practice, preferably at a fixed time. Then a day will come when, because of the persistence of your efforts, inside something is getting ready and a door will open. It is bound to open. It is the experience of all who have walked the path. One day it is bound to open. The doors will give way. At that point of time, some other powers and forces will come to keep us there. The gates have opened, but now they will be hounds of darkness, the threshold serpent. So what he brings is fear. Oh, am I losing my head? Oh, am I losing my life? All kinds of suggestions. And one has to just keep them at bay. They will come. But once the resolve of yoga, go through to the end. So that is how it works. They will come to distract us, to keep us tied down. Many works will come. All kinds of things will come. So one of the excuses will come, I have no time to sit and meditate. Supposing one said, I have no time to sit and call the divine or meet God, will we say that? No, it's our time with the divine. Whatever happens, it has to be done, it has to be done. And Sri Aurobindo says, regularity and punctuality and self-discipline is a way to achieve mastery, which helps. So one picks up a time, sits, regardless of what happens. So this is what we read in the first part. This is how the resistance of the physical nature is overcome. But then when we enter, and that's where we had stopped, the danger doesn't end. It becomes more acute, more deceptive, because now we are freed from the individual consciousness and its boundaries, and we are projected into what is called in yoga as cosmic ignorance, not the cosmic truth. It's a much wider field, subtle field, full of all kinds of things. It's a mixed baggage. And that's where we had stopped, and we'll continue from there. It's on page 492. It's about the life world, the cosmic vital, if you want to put it, into which the sadhak enters, cosmic ignorance, the beginnings of the cosmic consciousness. Enormous was its vast and passionate voice. Suddenly one feels as if one has entered into wideness and power. These are the two things. Because the bounds of the limited ordinary consciousness are gone. There is a wideness, not the true spiritual wideness, but the wideness of entering into a wider field. And the sense of power. It cried to her listening spirit as it ran, demanding God's submission to chainless force. All force is not the mother's force. All force which is extraordinary, which makes us feel exultant, exhilarating, is not the mother's force. So this discrimination, naturally in the beginning, all these experiences come to almost everyone. One has to just persist and go through, and then one gets the hang of it. A deaf force calling to a status dumb, a thousand voices in a muted vast, it claimed the heart's support for its clutch at joy. And this world carries with it the sense of joy, power, wideness, but no illumination and no peace. No uplifting, no surrender. It demands God to surrender to its chainless force. So these are very subtle signs. Aggrandizes the ego. For its need to act, the witness soul's consent. For its lust of power, her neutral being seal. Because she is moving on the path of yoga. There are no choices. So he says, fine, I am there. Accept me. They will knock at the heart. And if we admit these influences, we have to watch them and pass. This is what Sri Aurobindo recommends. Watch them, observe them, and pass. Know their real nature. They will come. But pass through. Into the wideness of her watching self, it brought a grandiose gust of the breath of life. Its torrent carried the world's hopes and fears. All lives, all natures, dissatisfied, hungry cry, and the longing all eternity cannot fill. Desires can rise up in the being. Uncontrollable. Desire for food, lust, for power, ambition, sexuality, all kinds of things can rise up simply because of the entry into the cosmic ignorance in the cosmic vital. So, small little life is hard enough to manage. Imagine a wide field opening before us, and that's why repeatedly Sri Aurobindo insists only if one is open to the mother, trusts her, has submitted oneself to her, approaches the sadhana with the right psychic attitude, can one go safe. If the ego is the leader, then it will just be a terrible disaster. We know there have been yogas of this kind. Even there are yogis, well, yogis in the sense one enters into these domains, who believe that desires will go if you satisfy them. So mother was asked, because Sri Aurobindo wrote a very interesting aphorism. Now you see how Sri Aurobindo writes, and it's so difficult to sometimes understand it. He says there are only two ways of getting rid of desire. Either to satisfy them perfectly or to get rid of them completely. Now you see in this aphorism there is something very interesting. Sri Aurobindo is not saying satisfy them perfectly. He is giving this proposition assuming this much in the mind of any seeker that, well, the first is impossible. It's like it's only the second one that will work. So this question was asked to the mother, how to satisfy the desires perfectly. She says it's impossible. As simple as that. So Sri Aurobindo's aphorisms can be sometimes totally mind-boggling. It makes us think, can we satisfy it? How far? How long? It's a fuel which keeps on burning. It's a fire that burns down the fuel. It will finish the body. And yet it will not be satisfied. Like the man who became vegetarian. You know, he was a non-vegetarian and his wife kept telling him become a vegetarian. He would not listen. So once on Durga Puja, he said, no, today you make only vegetarian food. So wife was very happy. My husband finally has heard me. It is grace of the mother, and she prayed to mother, thanked her, everything. Then at night she told him, Swami, I am very touched. You ultimately listened to me. I am so happy you turned vegetarian and today you had only vegetarian food for everyone. So he started crying bitterly. He said, why are you crying? He says, you are also rubbing salt on my wound. He says, what salt? He said, don't you see I have lost all my teeth, I cannot eat non-vegetarian food. But do you think I don't have desire to eat it? I still have that desire, I can't eat it. That makes it worse. How much I have suffered, But I had no choice. So I made vegetarian. This is what happens. Life of desire, desires don't end. It's just that they remain inside, unable to express, tormenting us from inside. So this is what the chainless force. It called to the mountain secrecies of the soul and the miracle of the never dying fire. It spoke to some first inexpressible ecstasy hidden in the creative beat of life. It is a mixed domain. It has its touches of truth, moments of glory, and next moment it has moments of abyss. Both things will come. So it will also touch something of the true breath of life, something which is a glimpse of the glory inexpressible. And the next moment it can also open the ground below our feet. Out of the nether unseen deeps it store its lure and magic of disordered bliss. Mind has been cast away, so it just cannot put things in place. Into earth light poured its maze of tangled charm and heady draught of nature's primitive joy, and the fire and mystery of forbidden delight, drunk from the world libido's bottomless well. This is the catch. Desires which were hidden inside. That's why it's sometimes very difficult to understand people who take to the path of yoga. People say, oh, this man is worse than outside. Yes, true. Because he tried to climb Mount Everest. And he fell. And when he fell below the little hillock out there on which life stands. But he was trying something. And in the process, he slipped. If he is sincere, he will rise again and climb. 100 times, 1,000 times. But if he is not sincere, he'll break all his bones. It's a real adventure. It brings its own dangers. Imagine the forbidden delights. We don't have to say what they are. World libido's bottomless well. Pleasure, the urge to live. Libido has many meanings. Seeking after pleasure. All this can arise and awake. Because normally all these things are kept under check by the ordinary reason or the moral and social notions. And these measures are broken. And the honey sweet poison wine of lust and death, they go together. They are very close cousins. So, of course, this also human mind can use as a justification. See, I am having all these things because Sri Aurobindo has said, no, I am practicing yoga. When someone was once admitted in Jipmar, very old time sadhak, Sri Aurobindo's time. And he got very angry with the doctors and everybody. So the doctor told him, you see, we are ordinary mortals. You are practicing yoga in an ashram. We don't expect this from you. We expect you to be more peaceful, more equanimous. And he said, oh, you don't understand anything about our yoga. Well, in a way, he's right, and in another way, he's wrong. It's true that yoga opens doors. Sri Aurobindo once mentions this. It's not that yoga does this. It's that the path, in the process, these things come. Sri Aurobindo describes that how, in the beginning, when he started on the journey, he say, all these terms have no meaning, started for Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo speaks like that. He says in the beginning. Well, the Lord says, so we take it. He said, suddenly I started experiencing anger rising within me. And he says, it was always foreign to me before that. He had never known anger. And it started rising. And when it rises, what in anger? Once the jailer or the warden just pushed him a little. And Sri Aurobindo just looked at him. What would have been that look? He ran away frightened and said, oh, he has gone mad, he has gone mad. He couldn't bear the intensity of that. So when we hear stories of Durvasa, we should at least sympathize with the fellow. That these things happen. Of Vishwamitra, they are famous stories. But again, in those stories, they don't end. See the difference. Look at Vishwamitra's life. At one point, he was overtaken with so much anger that he killed 100 sons of Vasist right before his eyes. Can we imagine somebody more cruel than this? He killed them. And yet, there is hope. Again, he took up to yoga. Again, Menaka came and he falls, has a child. Again, he leaves and goes to pursue his yoga. So much so that today the world is grateful to him for having given the Gayatri Mantra. And look at his name. He was not Vishwamitra, he had some other name, which I think hardly anyone knows. I have also forgotten the name. Anyways, he is known by the name Vishwamitra, the friend of the world. So these things come because one enters into cosmic ignorance and they will come. What happened with Durvasa? Mixed domain of cosmic ignorance, so where truth and error is mixed. So he was quick to curse. The beauty is every curse turned out to be a boon in disguise. That was the other part of Durvasa. So, of course, they stopped there. They are not our ideals. We are not here to become Vishwamitra and Durvasa. But we should understand the unique challenges of yogic life. Also, every charlatan who indulges in these things doesn't mean that he is leading a life of yoga. So, everything to be seen in its proper context. Drunk from the world libido's bottomless well and the honey sweet poison wine of lust and death, but dreamed a vintage of glory of life's gods. Ah, this is Amrit. This is nectar. One should know it is poison, only it is sweet poison. That doesn't make it Amrit. It is poison. It's tasting sweet. If one knows that, then there is hope. But if one doesn't know that and mixes the two, then there is a problem. And felt a celestial rapture's golden sting, these cycles of the infinity of desire and the mystic that made an unrealized world wider than the known and closer than the unknown. So this is the problem with this world. It is wider than the known. We have grasped on few things which our physical senses show us. So we enter into a domain which is wider. But to really know that which we don't know, we have to go much far. So, but this comes very close, handy. So it is closer than the unknown. So this world can very easily trap us. In which hunt forever the hounds of mind and life, tempted a deep, dissatisfied urge within to long for the unfulfilled and ever far, and make this life upon a limiting earth a climb towards summits vanishing in the void, a search for the glory of the impossible. Hunt forever the hounds of mind and life. That is the domain. Dissatisfied urges, ambitions. One comes to yoga not knowing it is there. Convenient coverings, lust for power. And then, after undertaking a yogic life, after joining a wonderful place like the ashram, one starts hunting for becoming head of department. It can come because this is how the mind plays. And then I am an instrument of mother. It can come in 100 ways. It can come even in this. I don't hunt for these things. Ego can wear 1,000 masks. And it comes. And then one gets stuck. So one has to be so careful. Things come, look at them, and when they go, just let them go. Because they are not the goal, they are only experiences on the way. This is what Sri Aurobindo advises, and we'll read that later. It dreamed of that which never has been known. Look at the irony of Sri Aurobindo. There is a lot of humor in Savitri, as I keep saying. It grasped at that which never has been won. It's something imaginary, unreal. The vital can fabricate signs of the real in the ignorance. So it dreams of things, it grasps which has never been grasped. Nobody ever grasped it. For example, if somebody says that, look, I am giving you a diamond just like that, free of cost, or give me 10 rupees in my shop, I am selling it for 10 rupees. Any intelligent person will say, stay away from this shop. It cannot be true. But then, if we are impatient, we will say, maybe he is right, maybe he is generous. That thing was not even worth 1 rupee and he has sold us for 10. Not even worth 10 rupees and he has sold us for 100. We have been cheated and we think we have got a diamond. Which never can be. It is not possible that, suddenly in 2 days' time one will enter into these kind of, in the highest states. It chased into an Elysian memory, a lost memory of an ideal world. The charms that flee from the heart's soon lost delight. It dared the force that slays, the joys that hurt. Many of these people, in Tantra we see this kind of a thing very commonly. They do various kinds of sadhana, and there are goddesses of the dark nether worlds whom the asuras pray. And they pray so that they have in their possession the power that can kill. The catch there is, if you fail to contain that power will finish you. And yet they undertake it. It's the force that slays. Because they are drawn to this kind of power, not the power that saves. And it will, these things are done. Jain, one can actually see a temple like that. Kal Bhairav. And you will see the hound of darkness at his feet. And there are actually cobras all around. In packets, but not a good sight. Anyways. And guess what they offer as puja, as prayer on the deity? They offer actually liquor. And if you go there, you have to accept it as prasad. So this is the other catch. If you go to that point, they really believe at a certain level of evolution, these things have come into this creation. Man was ready only for this much. And when one enters into these worlds, and these deities are very easy to please, like Sani Devta. People think, oh, divine, so far, deep inside yoga, Shani, he is nearby. Now this is the catch again with Shani Devta, for those who pray to Shani Devta. He can be very nasty. That's why they say, if you keep his fast, don't stop between. Now this is a catch. If you start, you are stuck. He may get angry, he has got tedha sight and he can create things. But people pray to these gods. That's a strange thing. Darkness, they are dark things. They have an influence upon our consciousness which is not right. What are his jobs? He is all the time judging others, criticizing others. That's his job. He never gives anything good. But there are beings who pray. So the sadhak enters into these. Of course, they are not sadhaks. But one gets into direct contact with these forces when one enters. One even believes that one has the power to slay, destroy others. It's very dangerous. Sometimes people may even in a righteous wrath start praying to destroy others. I have seen this happen in people who are even turned to Mother and Sri Aurobindo in earnest. And yet they come in touch with a power which brings this suggestion. Oh, he is a wrong person. Pray to the mother to finish him. Do japa to finish. And what happens? What gets invoked is not the divine mother who is full of compassion and light and truth and love and sweetness and might and bliss, but something very dark and inferior. And it starts entering the sadhak and spreading its sinister influence. So that's why one has to stay away from all these suggestions. They will come. The image shape of unaccomplished things and the summons to a Circean transmuting dance and passion's tenancy of the courts of love and the wild beasts ramp and romp with beauty and life. Circe's dance of Circe. It's very interesting. Circe is, according to the Greek legend, it's there in Greek legend, but it's more well known because of Homer's Odyssey, where Odysseus is actually traveling after the war. So there is a land of Circe, and he is cautioned that be careful, because she can be very deadly. But who is she? She is daughter of Helios, daughter of the sun. Life in its origin is again a child of the divine, but what all it can enter and do. So they, anyways, stop there, and all his men go there, and she offered them food to eat and wine to drink. They are all tired. They're very happy. Then she says, "Come, dance with me." "Oh, very good. Let's dance." So they start dancing, and she has a magic wand and turns all of them into swines. Of course, figuratively. So there is only one person, Eurylochus. He is now, he was careful that this doesn't look nice. Somehow he managed to escape and tells Odysseus, this is what has happened. Now there are all swines. They are dancing. They are enjoying. They don't want to go further. So Odysseus says, "Okay, I'll go." So what he does is, but as he's going, Hermes comes. So Hermes is the, messenger of light. So Hermes tells him, "Look, you are going, but be careful. If you're not careful, if you drink that wine, I know you are a special chosen one, but it's very dangerous." So it gives certain secrets to Odysseus and says, "Don't leave your sword. Even if Circe takes you to bed, keep that sword with you." This is all right. So he drinks the wine. He is a developed being, enjoys the meat. When she calls him to dance, he dances also. But just when Circe is about to make the last gesture, he takes out his sword and says, "I am going to kill you unless you convert all my friends back to human beings." Now, what is that sword? It is the sword of discernment, which Odysseus is advised to carry. So even though he goes through, and then of course Circe is very happy. She says, "Okay, I'm glad you have discovered. Stay here." After that, they have 100 days of nice, good time, and then go back on their ship. They have other dangers though. So this is the dance of Circe, in which the sadhak gets trapped. Summons to these dances, and these all happen inwardly. It brought its cry and surge of opposite powers. All kinds of powers. And what are these powers? Its moments of the touch of luminous plains, its flame ascensions and sky-pitched vast attempts. There are moments when this surge of cosmic life says, "No, this is for you, yoga," and one is suddenly in that state. One, throws a fit and takes vairagya, starts wearing a girva vastra, wears mala. "I am going to be a sadhak." So, high-pitched flame ascensions. Actually, it used to happen to a very well-known sadhak whom Sri Aurobindo loved and cherished. And when he went away, he was asked that why for someone like him? He says, "Oh, he used to go into fits. Fits where for days he will go into state of vairagya, start wearing ochre robes, mala, and said, 'No, I am going to be detached from everything. I will only do sadhana.' And then he would go into fits of despair. Divine is no good, starts doubting. He doesn't reveal to me. In a few days' time he should." So Sri Aurobindo says sadhana is not done like that. One has to go in a very balanced way. Both feet has to be steady on Mother Earth. There is very nice image in the Rig Veda about the soul. One feet is on earth, the other is on the heaven. Always to be grounded, so that one doesn't get it into the head. It's a heady draught. So moments of flame ascension, it's not like 2 days one is in a state of very big aspiration, and then 5 days one is down to the narrowest blind alleys. So one has to be steady, balanced. It's fiery towers of dream built on the winds. During those moments one feels, I am very close. Divine is just next door. I'll walk liberated from everything. Winds. It's sinkings towards the darkness and the abyss. It's honey of tenderness. its sharp whine of hate, its change of sun and cloud, of laughter and tears. Typical sign that one is caught in the grip of the vital. Now may mean few moments, few days, all is happy, and now all is full of doubt, cloudedness, sadness, despair, crying. There is no God, there is no divine. So, laughter and tears. Its bottomless danger pits and swallowing gulfs. Its fear and joy and ecstasy and despair. Its occult wizardries, its simple lines and great communions and uplifting moves. So, there are both experiences. Its faith in heaven, its intercourse with hell. Powerful line. So, this is the region through which Savitri is passing, and we'll read a letter of Sri Aurobindo which reminds us that one can never be enough on guard against this thing. And every voice that suggests or aggrandizes the ego, one has to thoroughly reject it. Even if, worse still, even more so, if people come and say, aggrandizing the ego, shut the ears like Odysseus said, put wax into this ear. Shut the head and mind. This world is in ignorance. It doesn't make any meaning. And one learns it. One passes through it, but eventually one learns it, gets the hang of it, that eventually that yes, one learns the right discernment. It comes with practice. That is what we read in Sri Aurobindo. So we'll stop here for 10 minutes, come back at 10 past 6 to continue.